It was a Wednesday night at 11 o'clock. And I remember I had just enough done of the model that I thought, oh, I could do a trajectory. I've got enough done to see where it goes. So I hooked up the trajectory line to Conley, and I lined it up to the, went to the frame, which he supposedly hit, that sequence 223, 224. And I was like blown away. I really was shocked, like the Dell Tech building or something.
You're listening to Quorum Radio.
So now we go to the animation that you did to work with
Peter Jennings' Beyond Conspiracy, the Kennedy assassination Beyond Conspiracy. It was in 2003.
So tell us about that. Tell us about what you recreated with the animation. What came out of it all? And
well, I had actually done that animation before Jennings. It was, years before Jennings was even aware of that. Back in 1993, I came up with the idea of doing it. I actually thought of this idea back in the early 80s. And what I had been researching the assassination since 1975. And the Zapruder film was always jerky and jumpy, and you couldn't really tell what was going on. And it occurred to me, I was an animation, single-frame animation guy since I was 8 years old, with an 8mm movie camera and that sort of thing. And it occurred to me, I thought, I could get a couple of friends to sit in two folding chairs. One could be Kennedy, one could be Conley. And then I put the camera on a tripod. This was my idea. And then I would pose them, and I would match them I would look at a single-frame editor that I had, and I would pose them to match Kennedy and Conley's movements, and I would take a single frame. In other words, I would have these actors acting out, frame by frame, and then it would be like an animation that you could then play back. But because the camera would be rock steady, you could finally see in real time what Kennedy and Conley are doing without all the camera shakiness. Now, I never ended up doing that. But then, fast forward, 13 years later. So in 1993, I had gotten into the computer animation desktop business in 1990. And by 93, had produced a thing called Robo Junior, which was one of the first animated cartoons, and that led to doing the M&Ms and a lot of other things.
Sure.
But I was doing the Kennedy assassination research on the side, and it occurred to me, I could use this program to recreate the Zapruder film. I could do something that hadn't ever been done before. It would be better than sitting two friends in a folding chair, because I would be able to project the program allowed you to bring in each Zapruder frame, and like a transparency, you could look through it, and I could align that with a computer model. And so the idea was, I built a model of the Yeah, I built a computer model faithful to the scene of the shooting, a car faithful to the size of the car and so forth, and then figures to represent Kennedy and Conley. And then basically I would be able to pose these figures to match each frame of the Zapruder film. And it was only 486 frames, I say only. But I thought, okay, it's not like an infinite number of frames. There's a finite number, and it might take a while, but it's doable. So it took me about 6 weeks every day, 8 hours a day, to do 20 frames or 30 frames, and I worked my way through it.
Yeah.
And when I got done, I remember it was a Wednesday night. I don't know why this sticks in my mind, but it was a Wednesday night at 11 o'clock. Now, maybe I'm misremembering that like we were talking earlier. Maybe it was 10 o'clock and it was a Tuesday night, but whatever. I've always told the story this way, so I'm going to keep telling it. It was a Wednesday night at 11 o'clock, and I remember I had just enough done of the model that I thought, oh, I could do a trajectory for the single bullet there. I've got enough done to see where it goes. And, of course, that was one of the whole points of doing this. So I hooked up the trajectory line to Conley, and I lined it up to the, went to the frame, which he supposedly hit, that sequence 223, 224, and I was like blown away because it went right back. It passed right through Kennedy, right through his throat and his back, and right back up through the 6th floor sniper's nest window. And I really was shocked because I'd been reading conspiracy stuff all that time. I thought I was going to show it going somewhere else, like the Dell Tech building or something.
Right,
and then, of course, over the next months, you refine it and so forth, and make sure that you're right, and it wasn't just a fluke,
By the way, there's a lot. This is fascinating. What was the angle of incidence between the window and JF Kennedy's back?
I'm matching these frames, the model, to match the film, and then I can go back in and fish out an angle, Because first, you got to take into account. All right, now the street's at an angle. What angle are we talking about? Relative to the world, or relative to the street, or relative to the car, which is on an angle? There's all these other things. I went in and fished out angles and looked at what the Warren Commission came up with, and it's like it was so close as to I might have been off, 2/10 of what it didn't matter. The margin of error in the model and in my placing and the method I used could have easily introduced that. So it was close enough. I mean, it basically was, then that's the thing, of course. I didn't really do anything different other than make a visual that illustrated what the Warren Commission had found out. And if you took the film out of it, take that out of the equation, and just look at the forensics, the bullets were all fired from the rifle found in that building. The shells are under that window.
Right.
So
sure.
I didn't really prove anything other than it made an interesting visual thing. So anyway, in '93, I started it. I finished it in '95. I thought, wow, the research community, because at that time the internet was just getting going, and I thought this so-called research community, they're going to be fascinated by this. In fact, I had a little Sony Walkman 8mm video player, and I took it to the Ask conference in Chicago, and I showed it to Robert Groden, and he was blown away, of course. And he goes, wow, you mean you could put a camera where the babushka lady was standing and see what her film might have shown? I go, yep. You can put a camera behind the grassy knoll. Yes. You can put a camera in the sniper's nest window. Mm-hmm. You can put it on any building. Yes. I can put it where any eye went. He goes, this is the greatest advance in science in the Kennedy assassination ever. And then he found out, a few weeks later that I concluded that it was all one gunman from the 6th floor, and that was the end of that. It was now no longer the greatest scientific advance in history.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
but I saw the video, a VHS video of it in '95. Whatever, 50 or so people bought it, and it was 10 sequences, and the figures were new. It was very rudimentary, but it basically was the answer. And I thought anybody that's really interested in this will be fascinated by that. And some people embraced it, and some people. The people that criticized it at first, they said, well, he just fudged it. He just manipulated the people so that they matched the film, and then it went back through the window. And I thought, yeah, but if I did that and it still matches the film, then it's still legitimate, right? Right? I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
If I fudged it, in other words, if I just aligned them so it worked, but it still matches the film, how's that possible? Unless it really happened that way. I mean, so the arguments, I've heard so many silly arguments, and there's whole YouTube videos out there, websites dedicated to denigrating my work and claiming it's just a cartoon and what did I really know? And here's proof of why he moved the chair and why he resized the figures. And it's like, it's just all such nonsense.
Yeah, sure.
And none of them have ever come here and actually seen what I did, I mean, and the people that have, well, I had Z-Axis Corporation let me just wrap this up as far as the Peter Jennings thing. So 10 years later, the Jennings Group, it's the 40th anniversary, it's 2003, and they were looking for a new angle on the Kennedy case, something they might be able to do a documentary. They're kind of nosing around for a story. And a friend of mine, Gus Russo, who was actually a producer working with the Peter Jennings Group, he says, I know a guy who's got this computer recreation. And they went, we'll buy it. They hadn't even seen it. They didn't even know what he's talking about. But anyway, so they flew me to New York, and I did an 8-hour dog and pony show. And I basically laid out the whole thing and showed it. Here's what I did. Here's the results. Well, they were flabbergasted, and they ended up making it the anchor of the show. And then they decided, well, maybe we better vet this guy, make sure that, he's not just, he's bamboozled us. So they were looking around, and they got Z-Axis Corporation, which is one of the leading computer forensic animation companies that do demonstrative evidence for courtrooms. They did the Oklahoma City bombing. They did the Twin Towers. So they flew a couple of guys up to my house. I walked through the whole thing for them. They took measurements off the actual model, and then they ended up writing a 3-page report saying not only did I do what they would have done for a courtroom presentation, but I went way beyond that. I covered my bases so many different ways. They said there's absolutely solid what I had done, and the conclusions were justified and exactly what they would have concluded, using the same method. So I was very proud of that. It ended up being nominated for an Emmy for outstanding graphic design, and although you never know on those award shows, but I ended up winning, and so that was great. It kind of justified the whole thing.